Hi, I'm Vivienne Wheaton, and today I'm going to ask Charlie more about our plastic pollution problem.
Hi there, I'm Captain Charles Moore. I'm the founder of Algalita Marine Research and Education, the Moore Institute for Plastic Pollution Research, and Long Beach Organic that turns vacant lots into community gardens. And I also am working with a new organization I started called Plastic Intelligence that will help us find ways to monitor worldwide the global plastic footprint and try to create a plastic benign designation for all the products that are dealt with in the economy.
What inspired you to write a book about trash in the ocean?
Uh, as a sailor, I grew up on the water. I was a surfer, a swimmer, a water skier, a scuba diver. I was sometimes more in the water than out. I call myself a marine mammal. And it was part of my habitat. When I saw my habitat getting trashed, I started having alarm bells going off. And after a certain point, as a sailor sailing around, I said, you know what? I go to sea, I may see a dolphin, I may see a sea lion, I may see a seabird, I may see fish, but I'm almost guaranteed to see trash. And when it got to the point where the surface of the ocean was more commonly populated with trash than with life, I decided I need to make the world aware of this. If we've got more trash than life in our ocean, and the ocean being twice the size of the land, then we've got a serious problem. So, Plastic Ocean, my book, was an attempt to get to the bottom of the reasoning why plastic production has resulted in plastic pollution and where it's going and what might be possible solutions, not necessarily to get rid of the plastic that's already there, but to keep more from going in.
Do you think that there is more trash in the world than there are people?
There's actually more trash by weight than the entire weight of the human population being produced each and every year. In other words, if you add up all the plastic products, the weight of them, that 1 year's production of plastic is, that is equal to the weight of every man, woman, and child on the planet, and it's going up. So not only is there more plastic than people, there's more mass of plastic than people. There's more pieces of plastic than people. I mean, just think about how many pieces of plastic you use in a year. And then you think about the percentage that gets what they call improperly disposed of, which is accidental loss, little bits and pieces that you tear off the end of a power bar or something, that little sawtooth edge that you tear, and then all of a sudden it flies away. These are things that get lost. So the fact is that we are being overtaken by plastic pollution as a system, a biological system. Our biological systems are being overtaken by plastic, which is a very difficult problem to think about and to digest and to then try to walk back and try to make better. This is our mission, but our mission is fraught with problems, and this is why we're here today interviewing. We want to push back against that, what I call the plastic attack, which is this constant influx of more plastic trash into the environment.
How much trash do you think is still out in the ocean?
Well, that problem is a static question. What you're saying, how much trash is still out in the ocean, that doesn't understand the dynamics. The dynamic situation is we're putting more trash in, truckloads and truckloads every single day are going into the ocean. So it's not how much is still out there, it's how much is being added to what is already out there. And then what happens to the stuff that's being added all the time, the stuff that's been sitting there for a while, the stuff that's breaking down into smaller pieces. All this stuff is very dynamic. It goes into different parts of the water column. It can be on the surface, it can be in the midwater, it can be on the bottom. All is a very dynamic process. So when we think about how much is in a place as liquid as an ocean, it's a very movable issue, and that's why we call it dynamic.
How do you get rid of the trash that you pull out of the ocean?
Uh, we archive our trash, so we really don't get rid of it. What we do is we put it in a warehouse for further study. For instance, we just had a request from a major scientific company to go back and find all the little pieces of plastic that we pulled out of the ocean and subject them to Fourier transform infrared analysis using an instrument at our laboratory in order to create a library of plastics from the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. So it's very important for a scientist to do what's called archiving. If you go to a museum, you'll find all the samples that the scientists have collected archived in their museum. If you go to a plant museum, they have cold areas where they save all the seeds that have been collected for centuries. So scientists don't typically throw stuff away unless it's just so much that they can't cope with it. If we get so much that we can't cope with it, we have too many pieces, we'll try to take them somewhere where they won't go to a landfill where they get recycled. But unfortunately, many of the things we think are going to be recycled that we put in the recycle bin don't get recycled, they get taken to the landfill.
How frequently would beaches close down due to too much trash in the water?
It's very rare that we see beaches closed because of too much trash in the water. What we see is too many bacterial contaminants in the water to make it unhealthy for swimmers to go into the water. But we do know that some of these bacteria are transported by plastics that go into the ocean. So there is some association with runoff and more plastic being more pollution in the ocean. We recently had very, very horrible fires here in the Los Angeles area, and the beaches were closed because they were toxic from all the poison runoff of all the burnt plastic and other chemicals that were washed with the soot and the ash down into the ocean. So even the birds couldn't feed, even though there was plenty of dead mussels and clams and things for the birds to eat. They weren't eating because so much of the runoff from the fires was toxic. So we have a problem with toxics and a closure of the beach in a fire type situation. But in general, beach closures are associated with bacteriological contamination rather than trash contamination. Although, no one really wants to go swimming in a beach. I've been in a beach where my waist down to my feet was just a solid mass of plastic fragments, and that's right here on my home beach on the peninsula. So that's unpleasant. It's not. You don't really want to dive in when you're coated with plastic. So yes, it's unfortunate, but the government is not going to close the beach because of trash, unfortunately. That's not something that's on their list. But they do realize that tourism declines dramatically.
What can 10-year-olds like me do to help the earth and the environment around us?
I think the younger you are and the more articulate you are, the better you are at communicating to the older generation the seriousness of the future that awaits you. The future that awaits you is not a pretty picture. In my youth, the earth was sort of an open book. We didn't think about pollution as a big problem. We thought about conservation, we thought about saving species, but we didn't think about pollution as being a big problem in my day. Today, that has changed. The enormous increase in the population and serving that population with increasingly problematic products has resulted in a kind of pollution that is compromising the future of your generation. So as you articulate your concerns about the future.
As we're in your beautiful home farm, how does this connect to our plastic pollution?
The key to reducing plastic pollution is local production. Most of the pollution from plastic comes from shipping containers, from packaging. Packaging is the number one most problematic part of plastic pollution. And by shopping local, by having my urban farm have one day a week and when people can come and get my locally produced organic produce without plastic packaging in paper bags or in a basket, and have local production so that it doesn't have to be shipped. Shipping containers, shipping packaging, all the stuff that's involved with fossil fuels in shipping, all the stuff that's involved with plastic in shipping. Those are the things we try to eliminate with local production. So I'm a big believer in thinking global and working local. And that's what I do with my urban farm. I make decisions on local production, how to best serve my local neighbors with products that don't pollute with plastic.
What type of solutions are out there?
There's still reduce as the primary driver. None of the big corporations have agreed to reduce anything that they're putting into the plastic production system. We, as individuals now, are forced to reduce our plastic footprint as individuals. So I think the biggest thing you can do is just tell people, you know, I stopped using this, or I stopped using that. I stopped putting water in plastic bottles and started putting water in a reusable, non-plastic container that doesn't pollute. I'm going to do my part to reduce plastic pollution because I know that's the only answer, source reduction. And we're going to reduce the source of the pollution by not doing it in our own lives, in our own homes, in our community.
Subscribe!
And smash that like button.